Genshin Impact, Tower of Fantasy. Genshin Impact, Tower of Fantasy, Genshin Impact. Yeah, Genshin Impact. And Tower of Fantasy. I know that on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter, whatever social media you're on, right now, there are non-stop comparisons between these two games, non-stop loyalties between these two games of which one is better. Is Tower of Fantasy really the Genshin killer? Genshin is the original and will never be toppled, etc, etc. And today in Genshin Monday, which is coming out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, I don't even know because I'm so scuffed, we will be talking about my personal experience as a Genshin Impact content creator playing Tower of Fantasy. And no, this video is not going to be sponsored by either of the games, and I will be showing clips from Tower of Fantasy as well as, of course, going around Genshin killing all the weekly bosses while I talk about and just basically share with you guys my opinions, my thoughts, what is going through my mind of Genshin Impact versus Tower of Fantasy. Now, if you think this is just going to be a plain old video where I bash each other against one another, the two games, and I'm like, oh, this is what's better about this game, this is what's better about that game, and you should only play this game or that game, and you're not real if you play that game, or you're a fake person if you play that game, I'm not going to do any of that nonsense because I am part of the camp that believes, and I'm going to sound like a really Asian parent here because it's such an Asian parent thing to say, but competition breeds excellence. And you've probably heard this several times already, but essentially what that means is that competition between games, between companies, between individuals is more often than not a good thing, because what happens is when you are competitive, when you have competition that's serious, you're going to try and be better than that competition. And what that means is more good things for the consumer, right? You're going to have better prices for the consumer, better rewards, better incentives for the consumer to try and make you stick with a certain game or a certain company. And that's what I'm hoping is going to be the case when it comes to Genshin Impact and Tower of Fantasy, because truth be told, I actually really enjoy both games. Now, I know a lot of people are like, whoa, all these Genshin content creators don't want to play Genshin anymore because they want to play Tower of Fantasy. Unfortunately, unfortunately, the perception of that is there's just so many people who believe that's the truth, rather than the fact that, believe it or not, content creators do not have an obligation to play a certain game, and content creators also are gamers, and gamers like to play multiple different games. Now, the good thing for content creators is, one, they now have another avenue of content to do, and they don't have to just rely on Genshin as their bread and butter, although some people might choose to remain that way, and that's absolutely a-okay. But what I want to emphasize is that the competition is always going to be, and always going to be a good thing, because we know that Genshin has not done the best that it can do for certain things, or they've taken their jolly good time trying to bring certain aspects of basically common sense to the game, which a lot of people have pointed out in the past that they can be better. Now, Tower of Fantasy is also not without its controversies, because as you guys know, there's been stuff like plagiarism. There's been stuff like, oh, this is a clone of Genshin, when at the same time, it's a little bit ironic because when Genshin first came out, everyone was like, oh, this is just a Zelda Breath of the Wild clone, and then it's basically just an open world game. And Zelda Breath of the Wild is not the very first open world game that we've ever seen. It's one of the most polished ones we've seen for its generation. But yes, we'll always get this cycle of people saying these games copied each other. But the most important thing, guys, which I feel like a lot of people miss all the time, is you should always be playing the game that makes you happy and that makes you have fun. And if that's Genshin, perfect. If that's Tower of Fantasy, perfect. If that's neither, perfect. If that's both of the games, perfect. And in this video, I just wanted to explain why you should be a little bit more open-minded, because I know most of you guys who watch my stuff are very open-minded people, but I also know there's some people out there who still watch my videos who might be very prejudiced to certain games, and like, I'm going to be loyal to Genshin only, or screw Genshin, I'm going to be loyal to Tower of Fantasy only. And there are things that I wish both of these games incorporated into one another. Now, combat system-wise, they're very different. And what do I mean by they're very different is, while you can rotate, both of these games have rotations. Genshin has 4 characters you can play with Tower of Fantasy, you actually only have one character, which rotates between 3 different weapons, as well as like many different gadgets that you can pick up on the way. So there's a lot more grinding in Tower of Fantasy and way more content to grind in Tower of Fantasy than Genshin Impact. Now, I know a lot of people have been complaining about Genshin, myself included, about the lack of endgame. There's just not enough stuff to do in Genshin, which is, I would say, a fair and reasonable complaint to make if you are someone that's really, really interested and engaged with the content. Because I know for a lot of people, they'll be like, there's way too much content in Genshin, including story mode and quests, etc., etc. But obviously, quests and story mode is not necessarily for everyone. A lot of people love Genshin, including myself, for the content. For rather the combat content, combat-related content, not just anything. And I think that's very, very, very evident. And there's definitely a stigma in the community where it's like, you have to like everything in Genshin, otherwise you can't complain about the content. How dare you complain when we have a story quest about a random Hilichurl, or Ella talking to Hilichurls, or Timmy, who freaking hates pigeons but actually pretends to like pigeons, blah, 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 blah. That kind of stuff, which for me is completely irrelevant and I just could not care any less about. You know, a lot of people are very diehard about that. Now, in Tower of Fantasy, because it's an MMO, you have essentially endless opportunities to grind, and because it's an MMO, which stands for massively multiplayer online, the other thing is you won't feel super lonely playing this game, because there's always going to be tons of other people playing, and the opportunity to grind with your friends is endless. And for me, being able to play with friends, being able to play with viewers, you guys, my audience, it's a really, really, really nice feeling, because it's not like, oh, I'm just sitting here by myself, playing by myself, and people are watching me. It's like I'm sitting here with you guys actually playing, which is really, really, really refreshing. And it's something that I feel like all Genshin content creators who have been playing Tower of Fantasy want in Genshin. The opportunity to have challenging content that makes us actually use our brains and play together, it's really, 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 really refreshing. And it's something I wish Genshin had. Why? Because I still believe that Genshin is the much, much, much more polished game. It looks cleaner, it looks smoother, it sounds smoother, and it definitely 100% plays smoother. Tower of Fantasy is still a little bit clunky. I would say the combat system is very smooth, it's very slick, it's very fluid, but a lot of the game is very, very, very clunky. Climbing mountains and stuff can be very clunky. There's certain terrains that you'll move over and you're like, wait, why am I like kind of glitching on this? Why am I not moving properly on this? Another Dream Solvent, by the way, very, very nice. But there are also things in Tower of Fantasy, like certain gadgets or certain techniques that allow you to traverse land much faster, much more interestingly, and much more entertaining than in Genshin. Now, what I'm really hoping, guys, is that these two games are just going to start yoinking elements from each other to make their games better, right? That's what I'm really, really, really hoping. I want Tower of Fantasy to take a bunch of stuff from Genshin, not, you know, it's not like they already haven't, and then bring it into Tower of Fantasy. And I want Genshin to take a bunch of stuff from Tower of Fantasy and put it into Genshin. I mean, both of them have basically yoinked everything from Breath of the Wild. So, yoinking aside, I think the opportunities now are endless. And for the opportunities to be endless, something that Tower of Fantasy has, which made a lot of people happy, is character customization. Is being able to have your main character, who also does have voice lines, unlike Genshin. I wish Genshin would bring in voice lines for the main characters. But what does Tower of Fantasy do? It allows you to customize a character, and this character, because the combat system in Tower of Fantasy, you're rotating between weapons, you can use your custom character to play with those weapons. You are at no detriment, you are not losing anything by just playing with your main character. And if you don't like the main character design, or you don't want to design a character, you can just use the weapons and the characters that they come with. Now that's going to sound very confusing, and what exactly do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is pretty much what I mean by that is when you pull for a weapon in Tower of Fantasy, it will come with a character. Now that character is purely cosmetic. It is just a skin, and you can use that skin on top of your main character, and you can use that character skin to play with all the other weapons as well. So you're basically at no disadvantage if you want to go just for the aesthetics, right? But what you're losing out on is the weapons. So if you don't pull for certain weapons, you're then going to be losing out. So essentially, pulling for weapons is like pulling for characters in Genshin. right? With Genshin, you get a whole skill set, etc., etc., and what you get with the weapons in Tower of Fantasy is a whole other skill set as well. And what you're doing is just unlocking the cosmetic alongside that as well. Now, I personally do like being able to play with multiple characters in Genshin Impact. Having said that, I also do think there are certain characters in Genshin who, you know, they don't look that cool. And I'd be totally okay, for example, if Zhongli was to drop Bennett's ult. Or if Zhongli was to drop, let's say, Xingqiu's ult. Like, I would totally be okay with that. And while I love Razor's design, I'd also be super, super down to see Zhongli using Razor's elemental burst. And I think that would be super cool. And why? Because I think Zhongli looks absolutely phenomenal, right? I think Zhongli looks incredible. And I would love to run around with him using all of the abilities of all the other characters and have the freedom to choose that if I wanted to. However, that's not really going to work because the combat system is the way it is in Genshin, and that's totally okay. And I really, really do like the combat system in Genshin Impact as well. It definitely feels smoother, and I think the characters, for the most part, beautiful. Bellissimo. Right, what are we going to get here? Okay, triple drop. Terrible Gladiator's artifact, and it is what it is. Now, something that I have discovered from Tower of Fantasy, which I have learned about myself, is that I have the capacity to maybe game for 3 hours at most per day. As at the very least, if it's tied to content, after 3 hours of gaming and streaming content or making videos for gaming, I get tired. And I'm just an old man, you know, 53 years young. And I just can't bring myself to play more than 3 hours of looking at a screen, being locked up in my room. However, a long time ago, when I was very much in the MMO world, playing stuff like RuneScape, MapleStory is another example. I didn't play it, but MapleStory is a popular example. World of Warcraft, the Final Fantasy MMO, all these kind of games, Lost Ark. I do like the multiplayer aspect. I think the reason why I went into content creation, guys, is because I just like talking to people. I like having an audience to talk to who also shares similar opinions to me or similar interests to me, and that's the main thing, similar interests and the feeling of belonging, where people appreciate that, and you can also reciprocate that appreciation to people who you share things with in common with. Genshin at times, I'm gonna be real with you, gets so lonely. Right, it gets so lonely, and it's sometimes like, I really wish I could do Spiral Abyss with a lot of other people, because I think this is a sentiment that virtually everyone shares, is that it would be much nicer if we could all do very challenging content together. And for some people, it will be like, oh, I wish my friend could boost me for XYZ content. And realistically speaking, I don't see why that isn't a thing in Genshin yet. I know Genshin is predominantly meant to be a single player experience, and they've sprinkled crumbs of co-op in, but I really do think the thing that made Genshin explode in the first place is being able to share the experience with your friends, whether that's on Twitter, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook, whatever. The multiplayer aspect, or just being able to be passionate about one game as a collective community, is what really made Genshin explode in the first place. And also on top of that, it's on mobile, it's on console, and everyone was deprived and stuck inside their homes during COVID. We're going to roll that, and hopefully we're going to get crit damage. Now, the other thing I've just realized now, ultimately we're doing like a comparison here of what I like and what I don't like about Genshin or Tower of Fantasy. Tower of Fantasy, UI-wise, the menus, they are horrible compared to Genshin. All of this is so nicely sorted. It's so nice and condensed in a nice manner where you can see everything very clearly and you know what everything is. I look at Tower of Fantasy and it's just so messy. It's so messy, and the buttons are messy. You can't really rebind your buttons, which is also an issue in Genshin. For example, I have these two mouse buttons on the side right, and in other games, I would assign certain commands to these buttons or certain keybinds, which will allow me to play more fluidly. I can't do that in Genshin, and I can't do that in Tower of Fantasy. Why? I don't know. I don't know why they don't allow me to do that. And I find that very, 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 very annoying and very limiting. And that's another point that I want to go on to is limiting. Genshin very much controls what you can and can't do with resin. That's the stamina system in Genshin. Now, Tower of Fantasy also has a stamina system and a resin system. However, in Tower of Fantasy, there are things called world bosses. So, for example, like the flowers that you see in Genshin, the flower bosses, and you can farm those essentially endlessly. While they are on like time limits, you can hop between different channels in a server to try and hunt them down, and you can farm those endlessly with as many players on your server as you want. So you can play with your friends non-stop, hunting those things down while exploring and getting rewards for it. And one of the rewards that you can get from those, so let me put it in this instance, is you go kill the fire flower, you might get a 5-star artifact, you might get a 4-star artifact, or if you're really, really lucky, you might get Bennett, you might get Zhongli, you might get Diluc as a drop, whether as a constellation or the character. If you don't own them, it's a very slim chance, but it will eventually happen. And I think that's awesome. You continuously play the game and you actually get rewarded for it. You explore and you get good rewards for it. In Genshin, if you explore, you get like 10 Primo Gems every hour. And it is unreal copium and kind of a slap in the face. If you log into Genshin, though, there are daily rewards. But that's the thing with Tower of Fantasy that they've been very smart about, is they are hammering people down with rewards right now. So if you started right now and you play for the next 2 weeks, you'll probably end up with 3 to 5, and if you're lucky, maybe even 6 5-star characters or 5-star weapons, which are essentially 5-star characters, and that's pretty insane. And the way the pity system works in Tower of Fantasy absolutely wipes Genshin out of the park. So, in Genshin Impact, you have a soft pity, which is essentially for most people around 80. 75 to 80 is where most of the time people will get their 5-star. If you get a character early on this banner, let's say you get Yoimi or Multi number 3 and pool number 34, your pity is now reset, right? In Tower of Fantasy, if you were to get a 5-star character on, let's say, Multi number 5, pool number 55, out of 80, 80 being the hard pity, that will not reset your pity, which means in another 25 pulls, you're going to get another 5-star. Now, that's how it works on the standard banner. Now, when you start the game on the standard banner, only for one time, your first 30 pulls, you're guaranteed to get a 5-star as well. And that's also not going to reset your 80 pity, which is freaking insane. That is absolutely insane. And again, you can farm 5-star characters from the actual game without using any resin, without having to use any currency, which again is ridiculous. Now, the chances are very low, but that always gives you an incentive to grind and play with your friends, which is chef's kisses. But yeah, I've come to realize that for me, time is extremely important now, and if anything wastes my time, I just feel like I don't want to do it, I don't want to consume it, and I think that's a very fair statement to make. And I think, like most people, will also agree with that. If something is wasting your time, there's literally no reason to keep playing it or keep doing it. And I think, yeah, that's just how I feel about certain things in Genshin. And I actually think that's the same thing with Tower of Fantasy. There's so many random side quests that I could care less about. Okay, it's this one. Boom, 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 boom. All right, come on. We got to finish this really quickly. There's just so many things in Genshin that I really just don't care about. But at the same time, the combat in Genshin is amazing. This game, when it comes to combat, when it comes to aesthetics, when it comes to character designs, I think is unrivaled. Unironically, I genuinely think this game right now is still unrivaled when it comes to character designs, how they're voiced, how they're voice acted, the amount of effort and work that people put in behind the scenes for Genshin when it comes to like making music. The immersion of the game is ridiculously high. Now, again, I know there are certain things like certain quests which really don't do anything for immersion, but the overarching part of Genshin is that the lore is fantastic, the characters are fantastic, and there's so much very interesting stuff that you can do in Genshin, and so much that you can learn about Genshin as well. And also, just look at this. This fight is freaking gorgeous. It's beautiful. The abilities are beautiful. This game is so well made. It's so polished. And I know it sounds like I'm just being a Genshin fanboy right now, but I truly do believe for a free game, guys, this is the main thing. This game is free. I know to pull for characters, it's gacha. But ultimately, this game is still free. And to me, that is absolutely insane. I get to play this on PC. I get to play this on mobile. I get to play this on console, whatever platform I want. And it's free. I just can't believe it. It's free. Tower of Fantasy does not have that same cleanliness, that same polish to it, where it's like, wow, this is like a really high-rated game, because it's still clunky in certain areas, and there's still stuff in there which I think is a little bit questionable. Translations are a bit of an issue in there. I know that in Genshin, translations as well, oh my god, can be a bit of an issue. But either way, I think that having these two games coexisting is fantastic. I want there to be fierce competition for Genshin. I want Genshin to be sweating at all times, guys. I want Genshin to have that sense of fear that at any moment a massive game could come out and take away the entire player base of Genshin. Because if they don't have that fear and they don't have that pressure, they're going to be lazy with decisions. In patch 3.0, we're getting a huge grinding quality of life update, which I cannot wait for. That is a huge role. This could be a huge artifact for me. And it's the artifact strongbox, guys. They are now going to be adding so many dead weight sets, or rather so many sets which we want to farm, but because they're in a domain with dead weight sets, Crimson Witch of Flames, I'm looking at you, we can now farm them. Viridescent Venera, I'm looking at you, I don't want Maiden's Beloved. We can now farm those from the Artifact Strongbox, and it gives us more incentive to grind, and it gives us more rewards to grind, and this could be an absolute god tier artifact, and I'm really hoping it will just roll non-stop into crit rate, because this will allow me to really enhance my Zhongli and make my Zhongli a lot better. My Zhongli right now has a very high crit rate damage goblet. Please, crit rate again. Oh, you let me down. HP is not bad, but that's not what I'm looking for. I need 2 more crit rate rolls. 2 more crit rate rolls. But regardless, my point is, I'm very glad that Genshin is starting to make these quality of life updates. Ooh, this could really be a Zhongli artifact, but the crit rate is not good enough. It is unfortunately not good enough. Yeah, we can roll this. We can roll this. But that update, guys, it's coming in patch 3.0. It took 3 mega patches for them to realize that we needed something like that. Wow, this is actually a Zhongli piece. I'll keep that for now, but I wish that was crit rate instead of HP. But we'll see, we'll see. Maybe there's builds that I can use with that. But yeah, like, it's just been slow. Remember when we first started this game? How much resin did we start with? Was it 120? Was it even less than that? I don't even remember anymore. We didn't even have condensed resin back then. When Genshin first came out, there were just so many questionable things. And now, they're gone. You know, a lot of them have been made better. A lot of the quality of life things have been improved. And I want more of that for Genshin. And that's why competition is good. So, at the end of the day, guys, whether you like Tower of Fantasy, whether you like Genshin, whether you like playing both, good for you. But the one downside of competition is obviously the toxicity that it breeds. I don't like seeing people like arguing, oh, frick you, you went to Genshin Impact, or frick you, you went to Tower of Fantasy, frick you, went to Lost Ark, you're a traitor, how could you do this, how could you betray us like this? And it's just like, we're gamers. Gamers want to play different games. They don't want to just play one game for the rest of their lives. Why would you be closed-minded like that? So I hope people give these games a try to learn more about themselves and learn more about what they enjoy and have a good time. Always do what makes, always do or make life choices that give you a lot of enjoyment, a lot of fun, and have a good time at the cost of nobody else without hurting any other people. That's how you should live. That's how I think you should live anyway. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's already long, so I'm not even going to bother doing La Senora. But yeah, I will continue to make content for Genshin Impact. Whether or not I make content for Tower of Fantasy, it's still up in the air. I'll decide how much I want to go hard in that game. I'm still playing it very casually right now and seeing where it goes. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. Have a wonderful day, and bye-bye.